If this is your first time here, my name is Teresa. I'm a surface pattern designer and watercolor artist. Today we are going to talk about how to use a brush pen or even a dip pen to add some really great details to your watercolors. So if you've been following my channel or me on Instagram, you know that I use dip pens and brush pens pretty frequently. Not always, but just whenever I feel like whatever I've painted needs a little something extra. So today I'm going to walk you through my process for when do I use a dip pen, when do I use a brush pen, or when do I do it at all, and how do I decide where to put those details. So first, let's talk just a few minutes about the difference between a dip pen and a brush pen. So let me show you first dip pens. So this is my favorite dip pen, and I don't know that this handle is still available. It goes in and out of availability all the time, so you never know when you're going to see it. This nib is one of my favorites. This is a blue pumpkin. Now it's a little bit blue in color and it has a pumpkin shape, which is where the name comes from, because it's very wide through here and rounded. I think you can see that. But so this is a great nib for a little bit thicker consistency inks or watercolors. I use this quite a bit with watercolors, and I'll talk about that in a second. But then you can also get, handles in a variety of sizes. This is a much smaller nib, and this one does really well with just regular inks. So when you need a real fine line, this is a great one. Now, this will do fine lines as well, but it's a little harder to control. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Now, a lot of people really like dip pens because they feel like they have more control, but I have the opposite opinion about that. With dip pens, you tend to get some blobs, and I love that. I love that look. Now with the dip pen, it's a much more tactile experience, and it's very scratchy on your paper. And if you're using a rough watercolor paper like I like to use, then it's going to be very scratchy and it can actually catch on your paper. I don't mind that a bit. In fact, I think it adds to the sketchiness and the randomness of it. So that's when I really like using dip pens. Now with the brush pen, they come in a huge variety of colors and types. So if you want colors, then Tombow has a lot of great ones. Arteza has some great ones. Let's see, I think I've got I have an artwork in here. So I have lots and lots of these. Now with these, you'll want to know whether they are water soluble or waterproof. That will make a big difference. With the water soluble ones, you can actually paint with them as if they were watercolors in a way. You can add water to them and manipulate them, and that's really fun. But I really like the waterproof ones to do my details, for the most part anyway. So let's take a look at some of the artwork. Now this one I did with a dip pen, and you can see here the blobbiness that happens. So when you are using your dip pen and you press down, it kind of splits right there and releases more pigment at once. And sometimes when you're not expecting it, it will leave these little blobs, which, like I said, I love that look. I think that's really interesting. And that's how you get thin and thicker lines with this one. Is a very light touch will give you thin, and then when you press down, it gives you a thicker line. And with this one, I mixed up my own watercolor paint so that I could get it a nice thick consistency, and so that I could match my colors better. Now, all of these brush pens come in fantastic colors. but they rarely match my watercolors. So I tend not to use these types of pens for my details, just because I want more control over the color of my details. So see, in here I used some green. Here's an undersea green over here. This is probably green gold. And that was a mixture that I made of these. So this lends itself to a lot of flexibility. Let's just take a look at a few of these. So this one is a very loose style. In fact, you can't even see most of these flower petals. On this one you can see a lot of them, but in here you can't. And I love this style, and to be able to take a dip pen or a brush pen and add in a few details just so that you can see what's going on just a little better, just to give a hint of what's going on here, I think is magical. This is a really great style. I love this style. This one was also done with a brush pen, but see, it's a little more specific or defined than this. This is very, very loose. This is loose and more detail. It's kind of a combination. You can see a little bit more of the petals here than in the other one, but I still used my dip pen, and you'll notice some blobbiness here, which really just adds shadow. And I love it, like right here. I love the way that makes this petal look like it's turned up. Love that in here. And that was a total accident. I did not mean for that to be that thick in that spot. It just happened, and it turned out lovely. So it's all over this particular one where that happens. So that's a lot of fun. And then I used it very lightly in a few spots here just to bring out some of those basket details. And then here's another one. I love the dip pen, especially on leaves and things like that, because that, I mean, how much character is that? That's just lovely. And then I went very lightly over here. And again, here's 3 different colors that I've used in a thicker watercolor consistency. So that's undersea green, that's that red, and then we have some probably Van Dyke brown there. Now for the brush pens, there's so much flexibility with those as well, and I really use the MICRON, either the black or the sepia colors the most, and I think they do come in other colors. Now I know MICRON pens come in other colors, but I'm not sure about the brush pen. I meant to look that up and didn't get to that. But so anyway, this is the black brush pen that I've used to draw, just to sketch out these pairs. And then I went back with some white gouache and just added highlights. So that's a fun way to use it. This one, I have a video on this flower. You see how smooth these lines are? And I tried to make this one a little sketchier, so it looks more like the dip pen, but this is actually a brush pen. And so you can add in missing elements, which is really a fun thing to do, which I really prefer to do that, to add in missing elements. I think it adds a little character and interest to the piece. Like here's a petal down here that there's no pigment there. There's no watercolor there. There's no watercolor here. I just drew it in with the pen. So that's real fun. Very quickly, a couple more. So here again, you know, you don't want to necessarily outline exactly your paint. It's fun to leave some white space, add in missing elements, and then to do some little fancy work here. That's fun. And this one, that's also with the brush pen. This one was a real fun one to do. And both of these were turned into fabrics. So that's just a quick overview. Oh, I guess I could show you before we get started. So this page, so when do I when do I use it? Well, for instance, this page in my sketchbook was very flat. Brighter colors, but it was just lacking a little character. And so that's when I like to use a brush pen or a dip pen, is when I finish something and it just doesn't look finished. And I could have gone back with some deeper colors, but I did a little bit of that, as you can see in here. That's darker, but still it just needed a little help, and it did not pop off the page at all. Well, now that really pops off the page. And so I have a hard time deciding sometimes between the black pen and the sepia pen. I chose to use the black pen here, but if I could go back and redo it, I would probably use the sepia pen. The sepia is still really dark, but it's not quite this dark. I have this page in my sketchbook that needs a little help, so let's go through it together and you can just kind of see what I do. So the first thing I do is usually, not always, but usually I'll just go ahead and add some touches to the center of flowers. And I'm using my sepia brush pen. I think that one will work better for these yellows. And I'll just start slowly and go around the centers, add a few little touches. Now, you could use the dip pen for this, of course. And, you can get all kinds of inks. Winsor & Newton has some ink. I think they all do. I mean, there are a ton of inks out there that you can use. But today I just want to use the brush pen. To me, it is easier to use. Unlike I've heard other artists say that they thought the dip pen was easier, I really think for these purposes, the way I'm using it, the brush pen is just so much easier to control. As I was talking about, I like the little blobs and stuff that you get, and I like the way the dip pen feels, but today I'm just in the mood for something a little easier to control, and so I'm going with the brush pen. And now I just want to step back, take a look, say, okay, that helped quite a bit, but I want to move around these flowers a little bit as well. If you notice, I'm not tracing all the way around the petal. I just want to do some sketchy lines, and I really like doing some little wiggly lines like that. I think that adds a lot of movement to the petals. And we'll put a few little center, little veins, little shadowing in here. And there's no rhyme or reason where I'm moving next, but I think I'm going to go with this leaf, and I'm going to press down right here, and then I'll lift back up to make some shadowing under there. And another little vein. And see, this looks black. I mean, this looks really dark. It's just not as intense of a dark as the true black is. And this petal is a little bit on the square side, so I want to soften that up a little bit. So I'm going to draw outside of the pigment. And then maybe go a little bit around this one. The hardest part to me on flowers is deciding which petals to do and which not to do. But right here, where these two are snuggled up next to each other, I think I am going to put a little line right there, just to separate those a little more. And then maybe add a little bottom part to that one that's flipping up. And that's probably enough for that one. Let's move over here to this one. Let's see. I think I'm going to add in a leaf here that's not really here. Yeah, that looks great. Yeah, I like to add in a few things like that, and you don't want just one thing like that. So I'm going to put one right here. We have a lot of space to fill right there. My pen is getting old there. The ink's not wanting to come out very well, so that's okay. We'll just go back over it. And that leaf I'm not real happy with, so let's see what we can do for that. And I should have just left it with that one side, but I didn't. I went ahead and did the whole thing, and now I'm not happy with it. But you know what? This is a sketchbook. It doesn't matter. Let's go up to this one. I like these little profile blooms, but the problem is, you know, you don't want to do too much. So I think I'll do the leaf right here. And see, there's some blending that's happening between that leaf and this petal. And I really don't want to cover that up so much, but it does need a little something more. So that would not have been my first preference since we did have some merging of the pigment, but oh well. And this little flower down here, I had started doing some detail work on it with my paintbrush and a little bit deeper pigment, but it dried very light, much lighter than I wanted. So I quit doing that, knowing that I was probably going to come back with my brush pen. And now with a flower like this, if you do 3 petals, then you're going to have a triangle. And that's awkward. So you don't want to have a triangle that's just not very pleasing to the eye, to me. So pick wisely of which petals you want to do. So I think I'm going to go back over and we'll have a little bit on that one. And that looks pretty good. And maybe something over here. I'll just do a few little marks, and that's probably enough for that one. We'll do this leaf. Be sure to try to use a little bit thicker portions. That adds a lot of depth. So this little flower, I think there's a nice little gap here, and I think I'm going to fill that gap with another petal that's not really there. Just to have another element that is just drawn in, not painted in, so that we can have a little bit more balance with those features. And this leaf over here drives me crazy. I do not like that leaf. It's very large and just kind of blobby, so I am going to draw in a leaf that's smaller than that. And I think that's better. And it's really the only element that's off the page. So if this were a real painting, I would make sure if one element's coming off, then I would have other elements that go off the edge. But this is just a sketchbook, so I'm not going to worry about that. That's just fine. Let's put a little bit on this flower. The beauty of this is that you can really go crazy and do whatever you want. You can have as much detail as you want. You know, do it in your own style. You can draw in some real fun shapes, really anything. Anything goes. And I'm just going to do some little curlicues because I like having some little curlicues in things like this. I think that's really good space fillers and can help add some balance in a very light way. So we'll add a few more in around here. And I probably have just done a little too many right there, but it's okay. So we only have a few more flowers to go if we even choose to do all of them. You know, sometimes I won't do every single flower. In fact, I usually don't, but on something this small, I don't know, I'm just kind of in the mood to do every flower today, I think. At least something small. And this one I'm going to keep it kind of light since this flower is really more of a background flower. Let's put a little shape in that one. Something a little more frilly. Let's see, we still have this big flower right here that we need to do something to. I don't want it to be overbearing. It is the focal point of the page, that one and this other one beside it. But I don't want to go overboard with it. So I think I'll round out that petal. Maybe add a little center line. Let's do that. Again, I don't want a triangle, so just being conscious not to have that triangle. Okay, let's do a little something here. Okay, I added a little deeper shadow there to make this petal look like it's turning up a little bit on the sides. Maybe add a few little lines there to help with that illusion. Okay, this is shaping up nicely. And that was probably a little too much, but it's okay. Ah, that's better. I like that. See how much better that looks than it did before? Isn't that amazing? Still think I'm going to add just another little leaf and stem. Right here, let's make this 3s. I'll add one more. We'll have it going off the page. All right. Okay, I'm done. That's it. I could add more over here, but I'm not gonna worry about it. Well, okay. I hope that gives you a little bit of a glimpse into how I move about a painting, deciding when to put a little detail and when not to put a little detail. And this is just this particular style. You know, you cannot go wrong with this. The best thing I can say is just grab your brush pen or your dip pen, whichever one you want, and pick up some of your paintings that you're not happy with and just go to town. Just experiment and see if you can make them better. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you had a great time with that one, and I'll see you next time.